On March 26, 2018, Jen and Sarah Hart drove over a 75-foot cliff in Mendocino County. In the back were their 6 adopted children. Sarah and 5 of the adopted children were way over the subscribed limit for the Benadryl that they had taken. Jen was way over the limit for driving with alcohol content in her body. What was strange is that Jen was known not to drink, and this picture perfect family was known to be, well, perfect. So, what made them drive off the cliff? What happened to these children? How did this all occur? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the Hart family tragedy, and we're going to dissect what happened because it kind of interested me, and I think it will interest you. I'm Detroit Alley Cat. It's been a while since I've actually videotaped, probably like 2 weeks. And I'm going to tell you what has been going on in my life in another video, but I feel like a lot of people don't want to know my personal stuff, and sometimes some of you are watching my video for the first time. And yeah, so if you're interested on why I haven't been around, I'll include another video, but I'm just going to talk about this event today, and it is True Crime Tuesday. So if it's your first time ever tuning in to my channel, I do true crime, I do spooky stories, I sometimes do unboxings. I'm going to start doing like horror movie reviews and all kinds of crazy stuff. If it's weird and unusual, I cover it. So, without further ado, let's get spooky. Did we notice that this was upside down? No? Okay. I'm not redoing this video, even though the spooky sign was upside down. Let's talk about Sarah Hart. Sarah and Jen Hart were a married domestic couple. Her full name was Sarah Margaret Hart. She was born April 8th, 1979. She was born in South Dakota, Big Stone City. In 2010, there were 467 people that lived in that city, so it was a very small city. In 2005, Sarah had her last name changed to Hart with her partner. Her partner was Jen Hart. 2009, she went to Connecticut, married Jen because I believe that same-sex marriages were legal in Connecticut. And let's talk about Jen Hart. Jen Hart was born Jennifer Jean Hart. She was born June 4th, 1979 in Huron, South Dakota. There are 30,000 people in Huron, South Dakota right now. So it's not like a great big city, but it's way bigger than the city that Sarah Hart lived in. Both women attended Northern State University in Aberdeen, South Dakota, and they were both going for elementary education. Sarah focused on special education, whereas Jen focused on like the whole big picture. Sarah actually ended up graduating and getting a degree, and Jen did not. The women began a relationship at the university. On Facebook, Jen would say that they used to be closeted and they didn't really want anybody to know that they were gay. Jen said that when they came out, they actually were ostracized. They first moved to Alexandria, Minnesota, then they moved to Westland, Oregon, and then after that they moved to Clark County, Washington. And that's actually the last place that they would ever live. Both women worked at Thurburger. I'm guessing that's like a department store in the area. Jen became a stay-at-home mom, and then Sarah worked at Kohl's. Sarah and Jen cut ties to their family for whatever reason, possibly due to criticism in parenting. Prior to adopting the 6 kids, they fostered a 15-year-old girl. A week prior to the adoption, they dropped off the girl to a therapist. They said that the Harts were not a good fit. And this was kind of weird because the 15-year-old girl said that the Harts actually talked to them about adopting 6 children. So when they adopted this 15-year-old girl, they would sit there and talk to her and be like, "You're going to be a big sister." And they got her all excited. And what they did was they just drove her to the therapist and they were like, they dropped her off. They never said goodbye. And then when they left, the therapist was like, "Okay, so they're not coming back because this didn't work out," which is really weird and kind of speaks to their like lifestyle and who they are. It just seems like they were quick to cut ties with people and just move on to the next best thing, which I find would be like kind of a big reoccurring event, especially with Jen. So they actually ended up adopting 6 kids, which I feel like it should be really hard to do something like that, but for some reason it seemed very easy for Jen and Sarah to do. They adopted in September 2006. 3 of them were actually related, and that is Marcus. He was born in 1998. Hannah was born in 2002, and Abigail was born in 2003, and she went by the name Abby. They were all from Colorado County, Texas. Something that's very similar with the 2 sets of adoptions that they did is they were both from Texas. I'm not sure why that was, but they ended up adopting 2 sets of kids from Texas. The second set of kids they adopted in June 2008. The fourth kid was Devonte. He was born in 2002. And the fifth kid, Jeremiah, born in 2004. The sixth kid, Ciara, 2000, was born in 2005. The one thing that I found that was like really interesting about Ciara is that she was born with her name spelled Ciara. And for some reason, Jen and Sarah decided that they were going to make her change the spelling of her name, and they actually made it spelled Sierra. It's not that big of a deal, but I just thought it was like I guess I thought it was worth mentioning that Sierra was born with her name spelled with a C, and then Jen and Sarah decided to rename her and spell it with an S. It's maybe not that big of a deal, but I just thought it was worth mentioning. Something that was interesting about this adoption with the last 3 kids is they were born to a woman. Her name was Sherry Davis, and she actually had a problem with drugs. She did crack cocaine, and she lived in Harris County, Texas. And her rights were terminated because she was struggling with this drug addiction. The sister of the biological father, her name was Priscilla Celestine. She tried to adopt these 3 kids. And the thing about Priscilla Celestine is that she actually had like a really nice house. Her house was clean. She really cared about these kids. She got an attorney and she basically said, these kids need to stay in the family. And they were letting Priscilla watch the kids, but one day she had to work a double shift at her job. So she went and let the mother of the children, the biological mother of the children, watch the kids. And on that day that she let the mother of the children watch the kids, the social services ended up coming to the house and actually catching them. And they decided because the biological mother, who had a drug habit, was watching the children, that it was best that they went ahead and terminated their rights and just remove the kids and put them into emergency foster care and take these kids away from Priscilla. And I find that really crazy because later on down the road, some of these kids they would have child abuse reported against these new adopted mothers, Jen and Sarah Hart. And for some reason, they did absolutely nothing about this. But Priscilla Celestine, the biological aunt, lets the biological mother just babysit the kids, not like abuse them, do anything. And the kids are like ripped away. There's no warning, nothing. The kids are just taken straight away. And I don't know, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. That I noticed right off the bat with Jen and Sarah Hart is that they were a very picture perfect family online. Like Jen had a very big social media presence. She was known for going online and she was known for taking a lot of pictures and writing these stories. And it seemed like it was almost like anecdotal stories, whereas it just seemed too perfect. Like they would one thing that I really noticed immediately with some of these pictures that Jen posted online about the family is that they had this one picture where they all had these t-shirts that said thing 1, thing 2, thing 3, and it goes down the line all the way to thing 8 because there's 8 of them in the family. And the thing that caught me, like I noticed immediately, is that is very similar to the Turpin 13. I don't know what it is about those thing t-shirts, but those families always end up having some crazy tragedy. And like the first thing I notice is this picture with all these kids with these different like thing 1, thing 2, thing 3, thing 8, or you know what I'm saying. And the Turpin 13 family had done the same thing. Now, if you don't know who the Turpin 13 family is, it's a family that abuse their children and force them to live in like really extreme circumstances. I did like a whole thing about them. It was one of my first like YouTube videos on true crime that I had ever done. I think it's interesting to me that these families that ended up having a really tragic ending too, that they seemed very similar. I'll like put the pictures up side by side and you can tell me what you think. If you're interested in learning about the Turpin 13, I'll actually include like a link to the video. Now I do have to warn you, this video was one of my like first true crime videos that I'd ever done, so I don't know if I'm any better, but I did seem to be new at it. Let me just say that. Going back to these picture perfect like profiles of this family, they were known to like go to these festivals and they had a YouTube channel, which you can look up Jen Hart and you can actually still find her YouTube channel up. And it's like she makes them take like these like snapshots of their lives. And it just seemed like it was this moment in time that she was trying to project something that I don't know how to describe it. You just have to look. It just doesn't seem right. It seems like something is not quite right with the family because you know what? Families aren't perfect. They don't always look picture perfect for everyone. They always like, some moms are online and they're complaining about their teenage sons or their daughters or getting into their makeup. It's just, life is not perfect. But Jen went ahead and projected this very perfect life. And it seemed very fake. At least it did to me. And I just found that to be something that also speaks to this case because it seems like a lot of people nowadays, if they want to hide something, they can do it very easily because they can go onto social media and they can project like this perfect lifestyle and they have these perfect families and everything is just beautiful. But behind closed doors, they can do all these different things and no one would ever guess. And that's something else is that, like, if you were to talk to people that knew Jen or Sarah Hart, a lot of them are like, well, I am friends with these two women, but they never hung out with them on a personal level. Like, never went over their house and hung out. Like, they would either go to a festival and meet these parents and see the kids there, which people, when they go on vacation or to festivals, are not always really who they appear to be. But a lot of these people, they knew them online. They were Facebook friends. So how are you really friends? Because you really don't know what's going on. Like, take for instance my picture right here, right? You think that like you can guess what kind of a person I am from this. My thing is a little nice and neat and tidy, or it looks dark or gothic, and you think that maybe I lead like this dark or gothic lifestyle, but you have absolutely no idea what is all around my computer. Like my room right now could be a complete disaster and you would never know because what you see is just this tiny little portion of my life. And like I like to wear wigs, so there's a good chance you wouldn't even know what I look like without all the makeup and the outfits and the wigs. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm just saying that it was important to notice that Jen Hart portrayed this like this lifestyle, this family, and I just don't think it wasn't real. It wasn't really how things are. And something that I immediately noticed about Jen and Sarah Hart is it seemed to me like Jen was more the dominant side of the relationship. There were not a lot of people that talked about being friends with Sarah Hart. Like she worked at Kohl's and so her coworkers knew her, but not a lot of them said that they were like good friends with her or hung out with her out of work. They always said like Jen was the more dominant person. Like Jen's the one who made all the social media posts. Jen's the one who made all the decisions. Jen's the one that did this. Jen's the one that did that. If you watch a lot of these documentaries that are about the Hart family, like there are two really good ones that I highly suggest watching. One is Broken Hearts and the other one is Thread of Deception. You'll notice that everybody that talks really talks a lot about Jen, and that's because I truly believe that Sarah had a submissive personality and, basically did whatever Jen said. Now, this is just me speculating because like I said, this woman, this couple, they you only knew them because of what they allowed people to see on social media. And so I can be completely wrong about this, but I wasn't the only one who thought this, and we'll go on to those reasons in a second. You have this picture perfect family, and you're posting all of these pictures, and there's something that's going on behind closed doors, and it's something that nobody could ever guess. Now, when I talked about the two different documentaries, what's really interesting is that these two different documentaries give you completely two different like perspectives. So the movie Threat of Deceit, it's really just interviews of people that thought they knew Jennifer and Sarah Hart. And a lot of them felt like sympathy towards this family. And there was like public outrage because of this. Now, the second one, Broken Hearts, that one really kind of shows you more of the real picture. It shows you the facts. It's not just interviews and speculation like I'm giving you right now. But what you do find out was there was documented cases of child abuse. Jen Hart's putting all these like Instagram, like Pinterest worthy posts up, and these kids were actually being abused. So I'm going to run through some of the abuse because it kind of gives you a good picture of what lives they had behind closed doors. In Minnesota, and that's like the first place they lived with the kids. In 2008, Hannah was seen with bruises on her left arm. Teachers asked Hannah what was going on, and she said Jen hit her with a belt. In 2010, Abigail said she had owies on her back and on her stomach. The incident was all over a penny. So they had found a penny in Abigail's like pocket and they punished her. And when I say they, I mean Jen and Sarah Hart punished her because she was not supposed to have a penny. Like I find that a little crazy. Like you're punishing and beating a child because they have a penny in their pocket. But I digress. Let's keep going. According to Abigail, Jen held her head underwater and hit her. She had bruises on her stomach and she had bruises on her back. When authorities got involved, all the kids said they had been spanked constantly and deprived of food. When the authorities get involved, for some reason, Sarah admits that she's the one who beat Abigail. But Abigail said it was Jen who had actually beat her. So it's like part of the reason that like I suspect that Sarah was kind of submissive to Jen because she like literally took the fall. At least I believe that she took the fall. Like she covered for Jen. I think that Jen is the one who was in control of all the punishments. I think that Jen was in control of all like the abuse and everything like that. And I think that Sarah just went along with that. And a lot of the kids, when interviewed about this, would say that like Jen was the one who did that. Now, when this incident happens, this is the first time we hear about the children being deprived of food, but it's something that continually happens. Jen actually ended up getting probation for a year, which I just want to make mention again, okay? The kid's biological aunt let their biological mother babysit them. They didn't hit them, they didn't deprive them of food, they didn't do anything to these children, and they got the children removed. Sarah and Jen are like suspected of child abuse, and Sarah is convicted of child abuse, and there are actual physical evidence that this happens, and she gets probation for a year, and they still get to keep the kids. 2011, Hannah told a nurse she had not eaten all day. When the nurse ended up calling the house, Sarah claimed she was playing the food card and she should be given water. I don't know. That's something else that like I think is extremely important because how many kids play food cards? Like kids can say they're hungry. Like even if they have eaten, like why wouldn't you I don't know why anybody would withhold food from children. It's just not good for kids. It's proven to be really psychological damaging for children to go through something like that. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. At this time, when all of these abuse allegations started coming about, the kids actually were removed from school and they were homeschooled. Now, I think that Jen made the decision to take the kids out of public schools and to homeschool them because she pretty much thought, like, hey, if these children are not around teachers, they're not around nurses, they're not around people that they can complain about the abuse, then there's no longer a problem because they can hide the abuse behind closed doors and they can keep on continuing on with this fake, picture perfect life that was not real, but that's what I believe happened. They took the kids out of school and they created this fake life online. Meanwhile, I think they were abusing the kids behind closed doors. In 2013 in Oregon, there began to be an investigation after hearing about prior allegations. Two family friends said that the children were forced to raise hands before speaking. One family friend said that Jen ordered a pizza for the kids and gave them all one small piece. When Jen discovered the pizza was gone, she punished them by making them lay on the bed for 5 hours and they were not allowed to eat breakfast. And the interesting, like, fact about this is that she did this while they were at a friend's house. She didn't do this at her house, she did this at a friend's house. So this eyewitness account would never have happened if they weren't spending the night at a friend's house. And friends stated that the kids were scared of Jen and acted like robots. So the kids were known to like walk down like steps, like the staircase, like in a single aisle. They like, kids are like a little rambunctious. You have 6 kids, there's going to be like lots of craziness. I have friends with 2 kids and there's craziness. But these kids never acted rambunctious. They never like freaked out. You wouldn't see them like acting out. They were all very just like deadpan. They were quiet. They kept to themselves. They were extremely well behaved, almost too well behaved, like almost a little bit frightened if that they got out of line that there would be punishment. At least that's what I think. In 2017, when they were living in Washington, Hannah jumped out of the window at 1:30 a.m. and ended up going to the neighbors. Now, when they lived in Washington, it was a very rural area, and which I love. I would love to live in a rural area. Just side note, the the neighbors are like, so my neighbors are like literally like 8 feet next door. these neighbors almost looked like they were like a quarter or a half a mile away. So Hannah jumps out of her window, and at this time, Hannah's 15 years old. She jumps out of her window and she runs to the neighbors. The neighbors' names are the DeKalbs, and she starts pleading to the neighbors. She's like, save us. They are abusing us. They're not feeding us. They're hitting us. And she's like hiding. And this woman's like, the DeKalbs are like a husband and a wife. And Hannah runs upstairs into the wife's room and she's hiding between the bed and like the nightstand. And she's like, please don't tell my moms where we are, where I am, because I don't want them to come get me. And then the DeKalbs, the woman DeKalb, notices that they're outside. And if I'm saying their last name wrong, I apologize. They're outside with these flashlights. She hears them screaming, Hannah, Hannah. And the husband goes downstairs and they're like, she's here. And she says that like Jen and Sarah and all the kids like bust through the house and they're trying to get to Hannah. And this woman that lives in the house is basically like, whoa, calm down. Like, you're freaking me out. And so Jen turns to Sarah and says, take the kids home. I'll handle this. And that's important because I feel like that's part of the reason why I think that Sarah is submissive to Jen. And Jen, like, she handled her business, you know? She was always the one that was in control. And anyway, she ends up taking the kids, or she ends up taking Hannah home, and that is pretty much, you know, all they hear from the kids for that year. But, you know, so the DeKalbs, they decide that they don't want to get involved. It's more or less the husband. So it's like a wife and a husband, and the husband decides like, I don't want to have anything to do with this. And a lot of people feel like that, they just don't want to get involved in people's business, and I understand that, but it still should have been reported. So the husband makes the decision that they're not going to get involved. Well, this woman, she ends up talking to her father, and her father, he waits about a week and then he calls the police and he's like, you know, my daughter's husband doesn't want to get involved, but I think these kids are in danger. And that's what he says. He thinks that these kids are in danger. And so that kind of puts the Harts back on authorities like watch list, you know? So they know that this is going on. Every time something like that happens and like the authorities are called, they notate that so they can decide if someone's got a history of abuse. It's like about a year later, because they only lived in that house in Washington for a year. And about a week before the incident happened, Devante is the only kid that is allowed outside of this house. And Devante, like, he ends up going to the DeKalbs again, and he sees the woman and he basically asks her for food. And I guess the woman ends up giving him food. She like gives him tortillas, and then he comes back the next day, and he's like, well, can I get 6 of this? And he's saying 6 because I think he's trying to feed his brothers and sisters. And I guess the woman says that the kids, like Devante, comes back and he comes back 3 times a day, and he's asking for like items that he can store, like cured meat, peanut butter, cans of stuff. And like, I mean, you think about it, and if this kid's going over there 3 times a day for food, even if that's an exaggeration, and the kids and Devante's going over there once a day for food, that means that they're being starved. Because there's, I just, that's what that means. It means they're being starved. And Devante was trying to take care of his brothers and sisters. And I don't know if I mentioned it before, but Devante was the only kid that was allowed to go outside of the house, which is another reason, like, that's just another form of child abuse. And I just want to make mention to this because I haven't talked about it yet, but I noticed when Jen and Sarah were taking all these pictures, specifically Jen were taking all these pictures of the kids, they all looked very young. So either one, they're not taking the pictures when they're older, or these kids are all very underweight malnutritioned, they're not growing. And if you actually if you starve like children, they can develop a form of dwarfism, which is something that happened in the Turpin 13 case. But yeah, I don't see any pictures where these look like regular teenage kids. And that's sad because another thing that I noticed is Marcus, who is the oldest kid at the time of this incident, he was like 18. I think he was turning 19, and he was never like outside of his house. So he was a legal adult because when you're 18, you're a legal adult. And he doesn't hang out with friends. He doesn't leave to go places. He's not driving. He doesn't have his own car. Like, these are huge red flags. Like, this is definitely some kind of extreme abuse. It's not even where you're just coming home and getting abused. They're not letting you leave. So you're never able to leave that situation. And when you're a teenager and you're growing up, you need to be able to leave your house just to get away from your parents or grow and learn and do all these things. I think that's just important to notice because I did watch a bunch of YouTube videos and not a lot of people mentioned the fact that these were not children anymore. They were like, they were kids, but they weren't like pre-teenager kids. They were teenagers, like 15, 16, 18. Marcus was 18. Three of them were like 15 years old. Like, that's a big deal. No, two of them were 15. Sorry, guys. Two of them were 15 years old. That's like a big deal for these kids not to be leaving the house, and they're 15 years old, and one of them's an adult. Like, that's a form of control, and that's a form of extreme control. That is very important to bring up is that when you think about what happened with Jen and Sarah Hart, this form of crime, this form of murder is called a family annihilator. And whenever a family annihilation happens, there's always an event that occurs before the incident. And this event makes the person who's like head of the household, which I believe is Jen, feel like they're completely losing control. And this incident happened, I believe, when Devante was 12 years old. Something that I noticed was when these kids went to these festivals, like the mom, Jen, I think she's the one who did it, would like make them have these signs. And like they were like, give peace a chance, or like one that was very popular that I've seen in a lot of pictures is one that says free hugs. And Devante wore this around his neck all the time. But if you look at a lot of these signs that these kids like had, and they like to go to protests too. That was important. You need to take your children to protests, right? They go to these protests, and these kids are like holding these signs, and these signs are like all rainbow colored. They got like writing that looks like it's childish, but just like I said, their life looked picture perfect on social media. I don't think those kids made those signs. I think Jen made those signs. I think Jen made the sign for Devante that said free hugs. They went to a protest. It was the Ferguson protest. And they were like protesting the police. It was a very important case. I'm not bringing up the case because I want to talk about this case. And in this picture that went viral of Devante, there is a police officer and he's looking at Devante and Devante's crying. And they're looking at each other. And then the next picture that's taken is Devante and this police officer are hugging and Devante's crying. And this picture went viral and everybody was like, this is what we all need in the world, blah, blah, blah. And everyone's like, this is hope. And the thing is that's great. Like, it is a very beautiful picture. It's very moving. There's a lot of like anger about what's happening still in America, if not more now. But I don't think that Devante made that choice to hug the police officer. I don't know. I think that Jen was like, this is a perfect photo opportunity, and had her son hug a police officer because she wanted it to be a cool picture. And this is a form of abuse because we don't know if Devontae really wanted to hug this person. Okay, Devontae is 15 years old and he's never allowed to go outside and do what he wants. And now we're to believe that he is allowed to make the conscious decision to hug a police officer at a protest. I don't think so. I think that these kids were emotionally and physically abused, and they would not make a decision like that on their own because they were probably afraid to make decisions like that. So I think that Jen Hart had this child do this. And what happened was, yes, this picture did go viral, but not in the way that Jen Hart wanted. It got a lot of negative exposure. It got a lot of negative press. At that time, there was a lot of anger going on, and there still is a lot of anger going on. And you can look up why, and you can see all that. But what it did do was it got Jen and Sarah and this family a lot of attention, way more attention than Jen can handle. So Jen decides she's moving from Oregon. She's taking her family. She has Sarah and the kids pack it up. They move to Washington, but they're still under a lot of like scrutiny because now a bunch of people are watching this family online. And I truly believe this is the event that made Jen feel like she was losing control. Now, Jen has given everybody this picture perfect view of her family that she wants everyone to see. And now the world seems to be closing in because when the DeKalbs started to like call the police, and then when Demonte went to the DeKalbs and asked for food, the wife, I forget what her name is, okay? Call me out on that. She ended up calling Child Protection Services. And Child Protection Services went to the Harts. And so Sarah and Jen both realized like their whole life is about to be torn apart. It's about to show that, you know, they abuse these kids because they're going to get the kids taken away. And I think that that was just too much for them. Like, I think it was too much for Jen. I think Sarah would have done anything that Jen said. Jen said that she was very depressed. She was telling some people this, and I think she told Sarah, like, you know what? We need to go. And she packed up the kids. They got into the minivan and they started using cash. And I think maybe there's a chance that they were just going to try to go live somewhere else, but they realized that they weren't going to be able to. I think that they got some Benadryl. They gave the kids Benadryl because there was searches done on Sarah's phone before the incident happened. And the searches were like, how much Benadryl can kill a 110-pound woman? Is drowning a very horrible death or something like that? Like, this was premeditated. I think that Jen talked to Sarah in the car and was like, there's just nothing to live for anymore. And we're going to lose these kids, and these kids are going to be put back in the foster system, or some crazy thing that they convinced them that the kids would not be okay without them. When in fact, the truth is, these kids probably needed to be, not probably, these kids needed to be taken away from these people because they obviously did not know what they were doing. They didn't know how to parent. And that day, they drove off that cliff. It was on March 26th, and there were letters from the CPS on the Hart family residence, and the minivan, it went down the highway. It stopped in front of the cliff. It backed up, and 90, I think it was 70 feet before the cliff, Jen put her foot on the accelerator, pushed it all the way down. It clicked at like 90 miles an hour and just drove completely off the cliff. They found three of the kids that day. The next day, they found another one. 2 weeks after that, they found a foot, and Devontae has never been found. I really wanted to cover this because there were so many different like views about this case, and a lot of people had like very opinionated views about it, and as they should. But the one thing that I took about this case is that social media does not always give you the real picture, you know? And what you see right here may not always be what it really is. And I just feel like there's so much to take from that because if people realize, like in this documentary I talked about, The Threat of Deceit, a lot of people were like, I never saw this coming, and they were such a happy family, they look so perfect. But they didn't. You didn't know them. You only saw what you saw on Facebook. You didn't know who they were. You didn't know what was happening behind closed doors. So I feel like that's really important to, like, know, is that what you see on Facebook or Instagram or even YouTube, that's not really what's happening. It might be. If everybody is completely truthful and tell the truth, then yes, that's it. But for the most part, I think people just let you see what they want to see. And I feel like these six kids really paid the price for this because, they so many years of being abused by these two women. And honestly, even if Sarah isn't the one who did the abuse, she just went along with whatever Jen said. It was these two women, and that's a tragedy because these were six beautiful children and they did not deserve to have their lives taken away. That's my true crime for True Crime Tuesday. I hope you liked it. It was kind of like twisty and turny, and I wanted to get my facts straight. So I hope I did that for you. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you liked my channel, I hope you would think about possibly subscribing, leaving a comment, telling me what you think in a nice, appropriate way. Anyway, thank you so much. And as always, stay spooky and stay safe. Bye.